I want it to be easier for kids who are seeing me play to do what I'm doing than it is for me, right? Like I want us to make progress by 2050. Some little 5-year-old can do this and not have to put in a lot of extra work.
You're why it's all alive.
It's time to see Gaelynn Lea.
Where's your heart?
She's a trailblazing musician, songwriter, disability rights advocate, and public speaker. Gaelynn's musical career started with a bang when she won NPR's Tiny Desk contest in 2016. Now she tours across America performing original songs and fighting for accessibility. I'm Jazz Jennings, LGBTQ+ advocate and a proud member of the trans community, and this is Seen, where people from communities whose stories have been ignored are able to share and celebrate the truth in their own words. Because after all, everyone deserves to be seen.
I think my music is impacted by disability in a few different ways. Some of them are more obvious and then some are less obvious. And then a few songs actually have been about disability. Birdsong is about the idea of wanting to pursue music but not knowing if there would be this kind of glass ceiling. And I still can't give you an answer to that yet. I feel like the jury's out. I feel like I've gone farther than I ever expected to go, and I never really had a plan to go anywhere to begin with. I personally got involved with music when I was in 5th grade. The year before, an orchestra had come and played for my school, and I just fell in love with the way that it sounded, and I just knew that I wanted to do it. So the next year, when I auditioned for orchestra, the teacher decided to help me try to adapt the instrument to a way that I could play it. So I hold it up and down like a cello instead of on my shoulder, like a regular violin. And just having that guidance at the very beginning kind of started this lifelong passion for music. But what dawned on me many years later is she very easily could have just said, you have a really good ear, but you can't do orchestra, so let's get you into choir. You know, so she didn't try to direct my path away from what I was interested in, and that really changed the trajectory of my life. The more I travel, the more I meet people with disabilities who were discouraged from playing. And that just makes me so sad because it's obviously doesn't have to be that way. I didn't even think for a minute that that wouldn't be something that I would figure out how to do. But the reality is that I don't know how to play violin, so I did need someone to teach me. But a lot of teachers don't encourage students to try adapting, even though their whole life is spent adapting, and adapting is just part of how they exist in the world. It looks like there aren't a lot of musicians like me out there, but there are. It's just so hard to get into the field that not everybody is encouraged to try or has the energy or doesn't feel welcomed. But what I feel is under-discussed is how big of a barrier there is, especially if you do require physical accessibility to get on stage. There was an event, a concert that I did in New York City. So we had talked about it, and they said, oh yeah, we have a ramp. Our bathrooms are accessible. And, I got all excited. And so we get to the venue, and the ramps are like little death trap snowmobile ramps. It was so unsafe. There's no way I was gonna use them. And then the green room was upstairs. And so I actually got ready for the show in a mop closet, which was just divided from the audience with a curtain. I don't think people realize what kind of inadequacy or what kind of conditions you're expected to just deal with or cope with, because otherwise you don't get to play, right? I think if a lot of people started requiring or refusing gigs that don't meet this basic accessibility requirements, I think it wouldn't take as much work to make change. But I think it could also move a lot faster if the word gets out and able-bodied artists start realizing that they have a part to play in this, that they also don't need to play at inaccessible venues, and that they also can like kind of start to shift what live music looks like.
We'd like to think that we are right. We want to feel that we are good. We say we're following the
People
light.
say I'm confined to a wheelchair. If I didn't have a wheelchair, I'd be confined to the floor. Like, I genuinely love my wheelchair the way you probably love like your dog or something. Like, it's a very special thing for me that like helps me to interact in the world the way that I want to interact, and without it, my life would be not the same and a lot more challenging, right? And so the way the words like confined to a wheelchair, to me, kind of belie this view of disability, but somehow my life is not as free or as full or as enjoyable or somehow like held back because of my disability. Thank you. I can't speak for everyone with a disability, so I'm clearly just speaking for myself in that I find my life to be fulfilling and valuable, and that my disability has made me who I am. I write the songs I write because of my life experience, which includes my disability, right? So without my disability, you wouldn't have me, the songwriter. So to assume that disability is something that automatically someone wishes they didn't have is very misguided. And I think that's from a lack of discussion and education and contributed to by the press. Like, disability is used as clickbait a lot. And how do you avoid that is to ask people what they actually want people to know, right? Like, you can go look up my disability, osteogenesis imperfecta, if you want. But what I actually want you to walk away with after you read an interview with me is that the music industry is inaccessible and we need to fix it, right? Like, that is what I think is important. Like, making the world more accessible can be a very personal thing that you personally work on in your own surroundings. And then looking at the language you use around disability, if you do use any of those phrases like suffers from a disability, or don't be mad at yourself because you didn't know, but you can really analyze the language you use. And the best thing you can do is ask people with disabilities what they prefer. That's what I mean by a supportive society, like not making us do twice as much work to get the same level of access. We've been asking for the same things since the 70s, basically. And there have been positive changes, but it hasn't been like a true cultural shift, I don't think. And that's where I think right now we're at this point where maybe we will get there, you know, like just now.
Forgive yourself, but don't give yourself away.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Scene. If you'd like to follow Gaelynn or hear more of her music, you can find her on YouTube and Spotify. That's all for this episode. See you all next time.